I still remember that morning. The way the frost clung to the edges of my windshield, the smell of burnt coffee in my old thermos, and the quiet hum of the radio as I sat in my parked car outside the school. It was 5:42 a.m., the world still asleep, but my shift was about to begin. I was the school janitor, not custodial technician or any of those fancy titles people use to make a hard job sound softer. No, I mopped floors, scrubbed toilets, and emptied trash cans. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. At least, it used to feel like enough. That changed the day I overheard the laughter. Did you see her hands? They're cracked like she's been working in a coal mine. She's always smiling, though. Guess that's what happens when you don't know any better. Their voices echoed down the hall. Young teachers, fresh out of college, sipping lattes they could barely afford, mocking me as if I couldn't hear. I froze mid-step, the mop dripping dirty water onto the freshly waxed floor. It wasn't the first time I'd heard jokes about my job, but something about that moment, maybe the way they laughed like I wasn't human, cut deeper. I finished my shift without a word, went home and sat at the kitchen table with my daughter, Emma. She was 10, full of light and questions. "Mom, can we go to the movies this weekend?" I smiled, pushing my tiredness aside. "Maybe next paycheck, sweetie." She nodded. She never complained. She just hugged me, her little arms around my neck, and whispered, "You're the best mom ever." But I didn't feel like it. Not that night. The truth is, I hadn't always been a janitor. Before Emma was born, I had dreams, big ones. I studied journalism in college, got halfway through my degree before life decided otherwise. My husband, Mark, left when I was 6 months pregnant. "You'll never make it without me," he said. I remember standing in the doorway as his truck disappeared down the street, my hands shaking, my whole world collapsing in one afternoon. So I did what I had to. I worked nights cleaning offices, then schools. I stopped writing. I stopped dreaming. Years went by, and the routine became my comfort. Until that laughter broke something in me that had been holding on quietly. That night, after tucking Emma in, I pulled out an old notebook from a box in the closet. The pages were yellowed, filled with half-finished articles, story ideas, quotes scribbled in margins. My handwriting looked like someone else's, someone alive, someone with purpose. I sat down and started writing again, not for anyone, just to feel something. Over the next few weeks, I wrote every night after work, sometimes until 2 a.m., my hands sore from mopping, but my heart finally awake again. I wrote about the people I saw, the cafeteria lady who sang gospel songs when she thought no one was listening, the bus driver who always carried extra sandwiches for hungry kids, the teachers who stayed late grading papers long after the lights dimmed. One night, Emma came into the kitchen rubbing her eyes. "Mom, are you writing a story?" I said, "Something like that," smiling. She climbed into my lap. "Can I be in it?" "You already are," I whispered. The words started flowing like they'd been waiting years to come out. I called the piece "The Ones You Don't See." It was about everyday heroes, janitors, cooks, aides, people who kept the world turning while others walked by without noticing. I didn't think much of it, but one afternoon, while cleaning the teacher's lounge, I overheard the same group from before gossiping about some online writing contest hosted by the local newspaper. "Winner gets a feature and $1,000, one of them said. $1,000 could mean new shoes for Emma, maybe even that weekend movie she kept asking about. That night, I stayed up late revising my story. My hands trembled as I clicked submit. Weeks passed. I almost forgot about it. Then, one cold Thursday morning, as I was sweeping the gym, Principal Harris walked in holding his phone. He had this look, half shock, half disbelief. "Grace, was this you?" He turned the screen toward me. It was the front page of the Springfield Gazette. My story, my name, right there in bold letters. "The Ones You Don't See" by Grace Walker. For a moment, I just stared. I couldn't even breathe. "You won," he said softly. "You actually won." Tears stung my eyes. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Word spread fast. The same teachers who used to whisper about me now stopped me in the hallways. "Grace, your story, it was beautiful. I had no idea you could write like that. You made me cry on my lunch break." And I smiled, but inside, I didn't know how to feel. Because while their compliments were kind, part of me still remembered their laughter. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. That weekend, Emma and I sat on the couch watching the local news when the anchor said my name. Tonight's Human Interest Spotlight features Grace Walker, a local school janitor whose story, "The Ones You Don't See," has touched hearts across the state. Emma squealed, clapping her hands. "Mom, that's you!" I couldn't stop crying. The next day, I walked into work and everything felt different. The air, the way people looked at me, the quiet respect that had never been there before. But the truth, I didn't want respect because my name was on the news. I wanted people to see that worth isn't measured by a paycheck or a title. It's in the way we love, the way we show up, the way we keep going when no one's watching. And maybe that's what my story really was about. Not revenge, not validation, but grace. The kind that restores what life tried to take. That was only the beginning, because what happened after the story went viral changed everything. The Monday after the story aired, the school felt like a different place. People I'd known for years, but who'd never said more than a polite hello, suddenly wanted to talk. The cafeteria staff hugged me. The principal called me into his office and said the district superintendent wanted to feature my story at the upcoming education conference. I didn't know what to say. Me? A janitor speaking at a conference full of teachers and administrators? That night, I sat at the kitchen table again, this time with a laptop the newspaper had sent as part of my award. The screen's glow felt like possibility. Emma sat across from me doing homework, occasionally glancing up to say, "You look nervous, Mom." "I am," I admitted. "I don't know how to talk to those people. They all have degrees and big words." She tilted her head. "But you have a story. That's better." Her words sank deep. Out of the mouths of babes, right? The night of the conference came too soon. The auditorium was packed with teachers, principals, and even local reporters. I stood backstage in my simple navy dress, the only one I owned that wasn't for cleaning or church, and felt my heart race. When they called my name, the applause startled me. I walked to the microphone, clutching my notes like they were life preservers. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then I looked out and saw faces, real people, waiting. So I told them the truth. I used to think my job didn't matter, that I was just the lady who cleaned up after everyone else. But over the years, I realized that what we do, the quiet things, the small things, they build the world our kids grow up in. They teach them what care looks like, what humility looks like. I paused. When I wrote my story, I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just wanted to remind myself that even in the unseen places, God still sees. A hush filled the room. I saw tears glinting in the lights. When I stepped off the stage, people lined up to thank me.
One teacher said, "You reminded me why I started teaching in the first place." Another whispered, "You made me proud to show up tomorrow." That night, driving home, I didn't feel small anymore. But the world doesn't stop to celebrate your victories for long. A few weeks later, I got a call from the Springfield Herald, a bigger paper. They wanted me to write a monthly column about everyday heroes. My jaw dropped. Me, a columnist? I said yes before fear could talk me out of it. Those first few months were magical and exhausting. I worked my cleaning job by day and wrote by night. Some weeks I barely slept, but every time I saw my name in print, every time Emma brought a copy to school to show her friends, I felt something healing inside me. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One evening, while I was scrubbing the cafeteria floor, a familiar voice called out behind me, "Grace?" I turned around. Mark. He looked almost the same, maybe a little older, a little softer around the eyes. He said, "I saw you on the news. You're famous now." The mop handle nearly slipped from my hands. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "I've been living in town again for a few months. Heard about what you've done. Thought maybe we could talk." My heart pounded. The nerve of him to walk back into my life after a decade like nothing happened. "I don't think there's anything to say." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I was a fool, Grace. I didn't see who you were back then. I was scared. But watching you on TV, it reminded me how wrong I was. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. I'm not that woman anymore," I said quietly. "You walked out when it got hard. I built a life without you." He looked down, shame crossing his face. "I know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." There was something about the way he said it, no excuses, no pleading, that made the anger inside me soften just a little. "Thank you," I whispered, "but I've already forgiven you. I had to, or I'd never have made it this far." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. After he left, I stood there, mop in hand, realizing something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget, but it frees you. That night, I wrote my next column about grace, the kind that comes quietly, without applause, and changes everything. As the months went by, my columns gained traction. People started sending me their stories. Letters about single moms working double shifts, veterans finding hope again, teachers rebuilding after loss. Each one reminded me that broken things can be made beautiful. Then came the Sunday morning while I was getting Emma ready for church. The phone rang. It was the editor from the Herald. "Grace, there's interest from a publisher in New York. They want to compile your columns into a book." I sank onto the couch, dizzy. "A book? You mean like in bookstores?" He laughed. "Yes, Grace, in bookstores." When I hung up, Emma squealed and jumped into my arms. "Mom, you're going to be an author." I held her tight, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Looks like it, baby." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought back to those early mornings scrubbing floors, the sting of whispered laughter echoing in empty halls. And I realized sometimes God doesn't change your circumstances right away. Sometimes He changes you inside them. The people who once mocked me now shared my stories online. The same school that once saw me as just the janitor invited me to read to the students during assemblies. But through it all, I tried to stay grounded. I still showed up to clean, not because I had to anymore, but because it reminded me where I came from. What happened next, though, would test everything I'd learned about grace, pride, and purpose.
It happened on a quiet November morning, almost 3 years to the day since that first story had changed my life. The leaves had begun to fall, swirling across the school parking lot like gold confetti. I was there early, not as a janitor this time, but as a guest speaker. The principal had invited me to speak at Career Day. It felt poetic, almost sacred, to stand in the same halls where I once scrubbed floors before sunrise. When I walked through those double doors, I was hit by a wave of memories. The smell of floor polish, the echo of laughter I used to pretend not to hear. I saw new teachers, fresh faces, but also some familiar ones, the same women who had mocked me all those years ago. They smiled now. One even approached me, nervously tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Grace," she said, "we just wanted to say, we're sorry. We were young and cruel, and honestly, jealous. You were kind when we weren't." For a moment, the air hung still between us. Then I nodded. "I forgave you a long time ago." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, and congratulations. You deserve everything that's happened." As I stood on the stage later that morning, looking out over the students, I spotted Emma in the crowd, 14 now, all confidence and heart. She gave me a thumbs up. I smiled and began. "When I was your age, I thought success meant money, titles, and shiny things, but life taught me something different. It's not about how high you climb, it's about how faithfully you stand where you are." I told them about the nights I worked when everyone else was asleep, about the dreams I buried and the grace that found me anyway. I told them how purpose isn't discovered in applause, it's uncovered in the quiet. And then I said something I hadn't planned. "You might not know this," I told them, "but some of the greatest heroes you'll ever meet won't be the ones on TV. They'll be the cafeteria workers who know your name, the bus drivers who make sure you're safe, the janitors who show up before dawn. They're the ones who remind us that worth doesn't come from being seen. It comes from serving." The room went silent. Then applause broke out. Not the loud, performative kind, but the heartfelt kind that feels like understanding. Afterwards, as I walked through the hallway, a young girl approached me. She couldn't have been older than 12. "Mrs. Walker," she said shyly, "my mom cleans houses. People make fun of her sometimes, but when you talked about what you do, it made me proud." Tears filled my eyes. I knelt down and smiled. "Never be ashamed of honest work, sweetheart. The world runs on it." That night back home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The air was cool, the stars faint but steady. Emma curled up beside me with a blanket. "Mom," she said softly, "do you ever miss cleaning?" I laughed. "You know what? Sometimes I do. It kept me grounded. It taught me to notice things other people overlook." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think you'll ever stop writing?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "Writing isn't what I do, it's how I thank God for what He's done." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the faint hum of cars on the highway. I thought about every twist and turn, the heartbreak, the humiliation, the unexpected redemption, and I realized how every piece fit perfectly, like a mosaic you can only understand once you step back far enough. A week later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten with careful cursive, no return address. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping of my original story, yellowed from time. On it was a single note: "You changed me. Thank you for showing me grace when I didn't deserve it." I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. I pressed the letter to my heart and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Sometimes I think about that younger version of me, the one scrubbing floors, holding back tears in a dark hallway. If I could tell her anything now, it would be this: hold on. The pain that breaks you today might be the story that heals someone tomorrow. And when I see my name on the cover of my book or hear it on the news again, I smile, not because I made it, but because grace did. Because the truth is, they mocked my job once. But now, every time someone hears my name, They don't think of a janitor. They think of a woman who refused to stay invisible, a woman who found redemption in the smallest places and learned that even the dirtiest floors can reflect the light if you just keep cleaning.